Ben Harvey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Monica.
First man on the show as well. I hope you feel very privileged.
Privileged, proud, and slightly scared.
So for those that don't already know who Ben Harvey is, he is the CEO of the renowned therapeutic company called Rapid Transformational Therapy, and also the sort of sister company Inner Belief and Marisa Peer. Marisa Peer is an incredible therapist, and I've had the honor of seeing her in action, and she really does transform people's lives with her type of therapy. And so it's just an incredible company to be part of, and I'm just very grateful to have you here on the show.
Again, thank you. I'm looking forward to sharing my perspective and some of my story.
Yeah, you've been on quite a healing journey yourself, and I think it's really interesting that you've gone from, professional rugby player to now heading up one of the most renowned therapeutic companies in the world. So I just think you have a really incredible perspective to share, and you have a lot of wisdom to share. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to chatting with you here.
Thank you. Well, it's been a journey. So we have a saying, healed people heal people. And that's meant that I've had to face a lot of trauma, a lot of my demons. And I genuinely believe that therapy and healing is a lifelong commitment.
100%.
But everybody in the world looks for quick fixes and what I can do now. And it's spiky, right? We have chapters, we have moments where life is going so well for you, you can't seem to do anything wrong, and at the same time you have a moment where everything's going against you, you can't catch a break, you feel like, why is this happening to me? And this too shall pass, the good, the bad, the indifferent, and I think being able to understand that, process the emotions that both good and bad bring up, is the kind of the end goal for finding peace, finding joy. And also, I'm sure we'll talk about relationships, being able to understand how to find a partner that is going to fulfill your needs, and then also how you can be that partner.
Yeah, and I think the way to form truly authentic, deep love is to firstly have that with yourself. And the only way to truly love yourself, I believe, is to love all parts of yourself. And that means even the messy parts and the parts that you don't want to turn to, you want to turn away from, or the parts of yourself that you deem so unlovable, to really be with those parts and accept them and love them. That for me is true self-love.
It is, and as a company, I Am Enough is our brand, is what we represent. It's Marisa's best-selling book. And painfully, to get to a point where I was able to love myself, I had to go through so many failed relationships, failings on my partner's side, big failings on my side. And it came to a point where I had to just face the demons, face responsibility, take the blame, and process it. And one of Sir Anthony Hopkins' quotes, one of my favorite quotes, is, "I'm a sinner. I'm an old sinner. But I forgive myself." And that's why I had to get to that point. There was no point in continuing to overanalyze and point blame, or then get to a point where you feel like it's all your fault. I just got to a point and asked myself, who am I? What kind of man am I in every aspect of my life? And am I proud of that? And when I got to the core, I realized I was. It's quite a hard thing to do, because forgiving yourself is one of the toughest challenges anybody has to go through. Because it's easier to blame everyone else than turn around and say, okay, this is what I need to take responsibility for, and responsibility is huge. Process it, accept it, and then forgive yourself. Otherwise, you're always going to live with the past. It's going to define who you are in the present and what kind of future you're going to have. The same repetition, the same patterns, the same things that go wrong in a relationship, the previous time and the previous time and the previous time, they'll just keep repeating.
100%. But also, I think a lot of the time, the blame that we put on ourselves, that we feel like we need to forgive, isn't actually even ours to hold on to, but it might have happened from our childhood, even in a relationship, and then we take on the blame and then interpret that as something wrong about us that we need to forgive. And actually, sometimes it's like that we don't even need to forgive ourselves.
I think you and I talk a lot about childhood, right? And we understand the inner child and all the things that people will often neglect or be too scared to face. I would go back to a boy's relationship with his mother, the first woman that he loves. A girl's relationship with her father, the first man that she loves. And those relationships are so defining in how we then interact with the women or the men in our future, whether that be friends, colleagues, or eventually lovers. It's complex.
100%, yeah. And then what we then do in adulthood is we then subconsciously are attracted to partners that we feel are going to redeem us from the lack of lovability that we felt from those primary caregivers. But then it's this vicious cycle, because the only person that can truly give you unconditional love is yourself. And if you can't feel that within yourself and connect to it within yourself, then it's very difficult to truly feel loved wholly by another as well.
It's a cliche of, you know, if you can't love yourself, nobody else will. But it's one of the truest statements. Whenever we look at people that are going through mental health and the issues that we address at RTT, ultimately it always comes back to an emptiness.
Yeah.
Something that they feel isn't fulfilled in their life. And they're seeking. They're seeking to fill that with different levels of short-term, what's the word I'm looking for? Let's look at social media. So if you look at the way social media plays such a big role in people's lives, you can see that when people are putting up certain stories, certain posts, the way they portray themselves on an Instagram or Facebook or whatever it may be, TikTok, is to be able to get approval.
Yeah.
And the amount of likes and the amount of comments to make them feel something that ultimately isn't real.
Yeah.
And when I talk to Marisa about this, we talk about connection. Why is the world currently facing the largest epidemic of mental health we've ever seen? World Health Organization spoke about 1 billion people dealing with mental health.
Wow.
Nearly 300
That
million
doesn't
people
surprise
dealing
me.
with anxiety and depression. And last year, we lost a soul to suicide every 43 seconds, nearly 800,000 people.
Wow.
And we're tribal. We're meant to be connected. We're meant to feel like we belong. And screens or living in the ether doesn't give us that true connection.
Yeah.
So if we are carrying things from our childhood, if we do have issues with the inner child and we're not willing to face them, we don't even know how to face them, then again, that will manifest into unhealthy relationships in every aspect of your life,
Yeah.
personally, professionally, and in love.
Yeah.
And a big part of why I do what I do as CEO at RTT and how I find myself in this position is because, sadly, I've experienced really painful episodes of mental health. I've experienced feelings of not being enough. That was actually a fuel for me. When I was a young boy at 18, I wanted to be a professional athlete. What was I trying to prove? And that was a fuel. When I launched my first company at 27, again, it was trying to prove something to myself because of trauma and issues I experienced as a child. But it can very quickly turn from being a positive fuel to a negative and can create other habits in your life that can be really, really detrimental.
Well, also, I feel like anything that we do from the sense of I'm not lovable unless I get this or achieve this or in this relationship. And again, this is a lifelong journey, but for me, it does come down to a lot of the time, like if you come from a place of, I know I'm full already, I'm so full of love and acceptance for myself, and then you extend out as like a service to others with what you do and things like that, rather than seeking validation. That's a very different energy to, you can be doing the two same things, but the energy behind it is very different.
But it's scary.
Of course.
It's not an easy process or journey. Christmas, I found myself by myself. I was with John and Marisa. I booked a flight to Thailand for 10 days to go and do Muay Thai camp. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt so vulnerable. I was by myself, 42 years old, asking myself, like, how am I in this situation and why am I doing this? But rather than taking the easy route, I had to face stillness. I had to face not being able to fill the void with seeing people or going out and all the stuff that people do in those situations. All I had was me, myself, and I, and my thoughts for 10 days. And luckily, boxing gloves and Muay Thai training camp to be able to go and release a different kind of, different type of therapy. But it's probably one of the most profound 10 days of my life. And I've done some pretty cool stuff. Gone to Everest and traveled the world and been a professional athlete and worked and lived in amazing cities like London and New York. And here I am on a plane flying to Thailand with tears rolling down my face, questioning so many aspects of my life.
Wow. The vulnerability aspect I'd love to dive into, actually specifically for men, because, and this is part of the reason why I wanted to bring you on, because I think one of my missions in life is to help more women feel safe around the masculine, and I think we have good reason, even ancestrally, to not. But if there's one perpetrator that then taints your whole view of all men, then you're the one that's still in that negative cycle, and you're the one that's imprisoned basically. And but I wanted to hear the male perspective, because something which I have a lot of compassion for men for, and when you were talking about suicide, I don't know the exact stats, but I know for sure that I think actually the biggest cause of death for men is suicide.
Biggest killer of men, the old statistic used to be the biggest killer of men under the age of 37 in the UK was suicide. That's now risen to men under 50. More than heart disease, more than cancer.
Wow.
Again, it's an epidemic.
Wow.
So, and then you look at stats on the other side, I think girls under the age of 16, one of the biggest risks is suicide. So this is non-gender, it's bias of age. We're living in a world right now where people get to a point where they feel their only choice is to not be here anymore, and that's not okay. We have to stop that.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about male masculinity, yeah?
I want to talk about vulnerability with the masculine, because my thing is I believe that when we have compassion for the differences between men and women, then we can unite so much more. And so I think vulnerability, as a woman, perhaps there's definitely other mental health issues that happen for women, but I think being able to speak to other women, or just speaking about your emotions, is much more kind of normalized for women, I would say. And I think that's a big part of what causes a lot of issues for men, is that they associate vulnerability with not being masculine, or a weakness of sorts. And so yeah, I'd just love to hear your perspective on it, because there was probably a bit of a journey for you as well when you started your healing journey of being vulnerable.
Yeah, so no, I've certainly not been perfect, and I've made so many mistakes in previous relationships. And what I can say now from all my lessons is true masculinity is really vulnerable. It's when I was younger, a year ago, that the masculinity came out when, my ego was hurt, or I felt like I wasn't being listened to. And the truth about the most masculine men is they want to feel safe enough that they can be truly vulnerable and say, I need to be loved. I need to feel that I've got your support, and that actually even me as a very masculine guy, CEO, ex-professional athlete, going to Thailand to get punched in the face, truth is, all you really want is authentic love from a woman, and to feel that she's got your back, and that she picks you and you pick her. But it took me a very, very long time to be able to face that truth, be vulnerable, and say what I need, because I always was in the role of the protector, the provider, the guy that would always deal with all the issues, and I had no chance or opportunity to be the vulnerable one, to be the one that says, I need help, I need your love, I need your support. I'm really struggling right now. I heard a podcast a few months ago, and it was a woman talking about her marriage, and it really resonated with me. She turned around and said, every day, me and my husband, we sit down and we have a check-in, and we just say where we are in terms of like 0 to 100%. And it's really honest, it's really frank, and if my husband turns around and says, you know, I'm at 85%, I'm feeling great, and she says, you know what, I'm feeling under 50, they change their roles, their responsibilities, and vice versa. And it's just kind of done in a very kind of open, communicative way. On the flip side, if either of them both say we're under 50, they're like, okay, right, we need to sit down. We need a board meeting. We need the marriage board meeting, because we know that this is when it's going to potentially cause conflict, or our individual needs aren't going to be met. And like that level of emotional intelligence, that level of communication, it kind of really stuck with me. Because it's easy to talk about, you need to communicate, you need to listen, you need to understand what's the actual tools to be able to avoid the conflicts that occur between partners, and within that framework, then what are the recommended outcomes? And it really, really stuck with me.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think that's incredible that that couple does that. And I think that's just one of the key things, is like both parties need to be willing to do that work, and it's vulnerable for both people. But I'd love to ask you then, have you always been able to, like, for you, have you always been able to tap into that emotional intelligence and that level of like vulnerable communication, or what did you do to get there?
I nearly lost everything. That's the truth. I got to a point where I went through something so traumatic in my early 30s that led me to, I was 32 and I'd sold a company. I was working for this $1 billion business, and something like so traumatic occurred to me that I then moved to alcohol and drugs. And 3 or 4 years of just really, if I look back now, trying to kill myself, that nearly happened. I OD'd. And I had to face myself, face my demons, and that was like the first time that I really went introspective. And everything in life is serendipitous, everything happens for a reason. And a few weeks after going sober, I didn't go to the doctors, I didn't go to rehab, I went cold turkey by myself. I wouldn't recommend it, it was horrific, but it was something I needed to do. And I got a call from Ollie Phillips, incredible guy, pro rugby player, Team GB, been to the Olympics. He called me and was just like, Ben, we're going to Everest and somebody's dropped out, we're going to try and break a world record. And at that time, I was emotionally so fragile, let alone physically. I was wrecked as well. And that was the start of me rebuilding that new version of me, mentally, physically, emotionally. And going on that journey of like loathing yourself, feeling guilt, really not liking the person you'd been, whilst trying to change the person you knew you were, was one of the most painful, but also one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever been through. So how have I got to a point to have emotional intelligence, to be able to hopefully manage the complexities of high octane relationships in every aspect of my life? It's because I've experienced so much trauma and pain in my entire life. And you've got 2 ways you can go. You can become a victim, or you can use that to learn and evolve. And luckily, that's what I've done.
Yeah, because I'm not saying that it's easy to do with like big traumas and things like that, but truly everything that happens to us in life, we can use it as an opportunity to heal ourselves further. And obviously that is so much easier said than done. But if you are able to kind of see it through the lens of, okay, how can I use this to help myself heal, to grow, to discover more about myself, then yeah, it's not an easy path, but it's definitely the most fulfilling one.
Yeah, it's again, you have to look yourself in the mirror, and rather than looking at external influences, you just have to look at your own and say, well, what can I do better? And why am I in this situation? Ultimately, I'm a big contributor to whatever the outcome is. If I had managed my emotions, my actions, my behaviors differently, would I be here? And every time I ask myself that, the reality is, I was definitely a big contributor. So you have to take responsibility. It's really tough to do, especially if when you're in relationships, when you take responsibility, if the other person isn't willing to also take responsibility, then it's easy for you to take all the blame.
Yeah.
So again, that's the difficult balance, because if you don't both have high emotional intelligence, or you might be different personality types, then all of a sudden you can become victimized. And, that's why I think men and women need to learn to communicate better. Conflict resolution is
everything. Yeah.
It really is, right?
Yeah.
Because we talk about communicate better, but it's like, no, how do we resolve these conflicts before they become too much?
Yeah.
Because a male's version and a female's version is often so very different.
Yeah.
If you had an argument with your boyfriend and you were both really upset, the version your boyfriend would tell his mates versus the version you would tell your friends, even though it was the same argument, likely would be completely different.
Totally.
So perspective is everything.
Yeah. And we'd also both, so there's the differences between men and women in general, but then there's also, we're all projecting our wounds, as we said, like from our primary caregivers. And so if I didn't, if XYZ happened in my childhood, which meant that that is a trigger for me, then something which for somebody else could be like, that's totally chilled, that would then, I would project that on from the meaning that I had from childhood. So it's so complex.
Yeah, we're only able to, anything I experience now, and the question you ask, my response is back on a previous experience. So if your previous experiences have been, toxic or negative, and often that's when you're in a new relationship and your partner might do something that triggers you completely and utterly, unknowingly. And then you go back to a previous experience that has nothing to do with that partner, this relationship, but your response is going to mirror that.
Yeah.
So that's why, for me, and again, personal, business, love, I try and really focus on my thoughts. The thoughts that become feelings, the feelings that become behaviors, the behaviors that become actions. And I've learned to really try and slow down and be able to say, okay, well, this is a really tough situation. I'm not going to respond. Or I might sit in silence with somebody that's being difficult.
Yeah.
And it changes everything.
Yeah.
If somebody's looking for conflict and you just say, okay, I'm not sure I want to respond to this at the moment. Can you give me a moment?
Yeah.
So, or the email or the WhatsApp or the text. So, okay, I'm just going to take some time and I'm going to process my thoughts and I will look at the context and see if it can be perceived in a different way. And if you perceive it in a positive and you respond in a positive, you've effectively diffused it.
Yeah.
It's really tough to do.
Definitely. And also I think if you can like be almost the mediator between those 2 points where it gets to like then outward behavior. If you can look at, okay, this is like almost be the observer of the situation of like, okay, that really triggered me. And then, we were talking about inner child. If you can then go in and like get into your body, speak to your inner child in that moment, that's when actually even, the most like triggering situations can be a gift in some, especially in relationships, because I do feel like I mean, that's why I wanted to do relationship coaching, is because I just feel like it's such a vulnerable part of people's lives, because it triggers, you know, your best friend or, you know, even a work colleague or something like that. They're not going to trigger you in the same way that a relationship can, because then it's like, you know, as I said, you're mirroring the relationship that you had with your primary caregiver, potentially, that you had like a really difficult relationship with. And then that's then, you know, you're attracted to somebody that then shows that, like, some of those patterns to you. And so it can be such a deeply healing journey, but you have to like stop it in between those points, basically, of before you just explode out from the hurt inner child. Stop it in between and be like, okay, I'm gonna spend some time here with my inner child and just see what's truly going on, because our rational brain might not really know.
Yeah, rational, irrational. It's called an age-appropriate response. So if you hold yourself and ask in an argument, when you're responding, is it you, the person right now, Ben, 42-year-old, grown up apparently, CEO of a big mental health company, or is it the 7-year-old boy that is holding onto a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, and doesn't know how to process,
Yes.
and therefore lashes out and
Yes.
gets angry.
Yes.
But now I feel that I've got a voice, so I'm holding on to the hurt, the pain, the anger that I felt when I was a little boy. Now I'm able to then roar like a lion, but the two worlds colliding is very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
So, as you know, I've done so much work on my inner child, working with amazing people like Marisa and other healers to be able to just face that.
Yeah.
You know, when you go and do regression and you go back to scenes and you're sitting there with yourself at 7, at 12, at 18, I think I went up to 26, and to see the truth of why I felt the way I felt, why I responded to certain situations the way I did, I was kind of like, that's how I got to forgiveness. Because a lot of the things that happen to us, nobody can live a life without experiencing trauma. It might be the first time you ask a girl out and she rejects you, or not getting into the football team, and all these different bits and pieces, and it may be things that are far more traumatic. Like we're all gonna lose people we love. In relationships, we're gonna lose our grandparents. We're gonna lose, you know, family members, and that's trauma, right? But then when you go back and actually understand the trauma you're experiencing in certain aspects of your life, that was how I was able to get to a point where I'm like, okay, I forgive myself, it's not my fault.
Yeah.
I watched Good Will Hunting this week, which is my favourite movie of all time. I cried a little bit. And when Robin Williams is at the end and he's just talking to Matt Damon saying, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Like, I urge anybody that feels like they're struggling in life to go and watch that movie, because it hits you like a ton of bricks. And when you say it to yourself, you replace the it's not your fault with I am enough. I am going to learn to love myself. I am going to learn to accept who I am and try and get a bit better. Then you're starting to be on that healing journey. And I think really great people are coming to your life when you start to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, because the way that you treat yourself is also how you're demonstrating to others how to treat you. And so when you have a healthy relationship with yourself, then you attract healthier people into your life.
Yeah.
So we discussed the differences between men and women a little bit. But from your perspective, what do you wish more women knew in terms of maybe how to navigate conflict with men, maybe also just to have a greater level of empathy and compassion for men who they might be in relationships with, or even just in general?
Okay. Men are scared of rejection. Men's ego is what ruins a huge amount of relationships. And women have all the power. In so much of now, we've seen society change in terms of the rise of amazing, beautiful women embracing their masculinity. And that can be challenging, especially if you come from a very traditional background like I do. So it's kind of this balance of, well, you want to be treated well, you want chivalry, you want to be made to feel like a princess, but at the same time, you know, I want to step into my masculinity. And that's really tough for men to navigate. And then I think the dynamics of women and men have really changed over the last 10, 15 years as a result of that. But yeah, if I was to say one thing, is you get the worst version of men, and I'm certainly talking for myself, I'm very honest about my failings, is if a man feels neglect or rejection, then the ego rises, and that's when toxic masculinity might occur, and communication breaks down. And I think, is it Martin Luther King says, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And it seems like really profound, but if you can come back to a position of love, and think about, like, we're talking about people that have spent years together. Often these arguments and stuff occur after the honeymoon period, right? So you've shared all this love, you've really built amazing memories, and then because there's so much emotion, you're unable to just communicate. You're unable to respect one another. You're unable to sit there and listen to your needs, and then listen to my needs to be able to say, well, what do we want? And it's kind of agreeing, like, what do you want the outcome to be? Well, I want to feel loved, or I want to feel happy, or I want to feel heard, or I want to feel trusted, or whatever it may be.
And I think making the outcome as well, the end goal, as like the relationship, for the, like doing it for the relationship rather than doing it for the individual of like, I want to win the fight, because then no one's won.
Let's talk about that, because men always say, we have no idea what the fuck you want. And I don't know if I can swear on the podcast, so I'll say it again. We have no idea what you want. So one of those things where, you know, asking in a way which is like, what is it you want? Or maybe changing that to say, where would you like this to go and end? Because at the moment, I see this as a conversation or a path or something that's going to end in causing real damage in our relationship. Is that what you would like?
Well, I'd actually love to ask your perspective on this, because this is almost like a bit too simplistic, but the way that I kind of view it is that the primary needs of women is safety and devotion, and the primary needs of men is respect and appreciation. Now, I'm not saying that either side don't need that, but like speaking from my experience, and to be honest, like all the women that I know, especially safety is, and not just safety in terms of like physical safety. Of course, you don't want to feel like your partner could beat you up or something like that, but emotional safety. And that is something which I think, because of the vulnerability element, a lot of men, and actually this is something which, if there's any men listening, I'd love for men to hear this, but so much of the time when women are feeling emotional about something, I think men, especially male partners, will interpret that as that it means something about them and that they're doing something wrong. And actually sometimes women just need the masculine to be like this sense, to provide this sense of emotional safety, that they can just like hold them there and not take that on as, take the blame on, or take this on as like, I'm the problem, which obviously is so difficult to do. But I think emotional safety in that sense of just a man that can just hold space, and I'm not saying to accept abuse, but yeah, I think that would be a primary thing. And then devotion in terms of just, I don't mean like following after her or whatever, but just, I think just that type of appreciation. But then I think men need so much appreciation too, because of what we spoke about before as well, of this crisis of purpose that men are in. Where, you know, and that's why these popular narratives of like, I don't need no man, or, you know, and even if they're just throwaway comments, it's like words have power. So I don't like that narrative, even just as a joke, because we all need each other. And going back to the emotional safety thing, I think there's, well, at least for me, I believe that a woman can be in her fullest expression of her feminine energy when she feels in a partnership with someone who is grounded in his safe, like masculine energy.
It's really complex, because ultimately you're talking about this kind of loop. So if a man doesn't feel respected, and that triggers ego, and you have an ego response, then that reaction and communication is going to make you likely feel unsafe. And I've been in these situations, right, where I am a protector, but when you're with a partner that just knows how to trigger you or to bring out your worst, and again, you need to talk about finding someone that shares your values, your principles, your hopes, your dreams, your future trajectory, and we don't start with that in relationships. It's like, is there physical attraction? Might be focused on sex, and it's like, okay, you need to go past that, and it needs to be really based upon like who you are on a super deep level. But that's what I see, and what I've experienced myself is I'm not getting what I need. Respect is like something that's really like manners, decorum, respect. My grandfather used to say that to me when I was a kid, and I love when I'm surrounded by people that bring that out of me, that elevate me to do that. I wear it like a badge of honor. But then when I've got people that then do the opposite, and I feel disrespect, then that's when my masculine comes out in probably a toxic way.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
and then it gets into that awful negative kind of trauma cycle. So
Yeah.
I think it really comes down to just being able to, and I've learned this now, just say, what do you need and what do you want, with no real pressure of this is what I need. And that's really tough, because if you're both going through something at the same time, it's kind of one of those where you just turn around and say, as a man, you do need to step up and say, what do you need? Would you like to talk about it? Would you like me to give you space? Do you want me to just hold you and hug you in stillness? Rather than saying, oh my God, is this me? And all of that fear and the anxiety and stuff, which then again brings up the ego, which then brings out negativity, because then you're going to be in some form of toxic communication. So it really, really is. And like I think I said at the start of this, is like, for me, the most masculine men, and the ones that can be truly honest and be comfortable with who they are, they will be the most vulnerable. They will be, I've had to go through this. It's so strange to comprehend that I've got to this state now from going through so much emotional turmoil and hurt and loss, and really having to just face who I am as a person, but then what I want to be and who I want to be with, meant that I got to a point where I was like, okay, this is the truth. Like, I can be the super masculine, and I'm fearless, and I'm this and I'm that, but get past that, and I'm like, oh no, the truth is, I'm that little 7-year-old boy. He just wants somebody he can rely on. He just wants somebody that he can love and can be loved back, and just give me a cuddle, basically.
And I think that's why in conflict as well, the problem is that everybody's reacting from their hurt 7-year-old, 5-year-old, 9-year-old, whatever it might be, and when we can get true with our needs of that 7-year-old as well, then I think and communicate, as you said, even if you do need to communicate the needs of that 7-year-old, that's very different than communicating as that 7-year-old, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense.
And my journey with my inner child, obviously it's like a constant journey, but what really helped me was actually when I spoke to my inner child, and it said, like, why do you keep abandoning me, And what I realized is when I'm reacting from that place of her, I'm not helping her. But if I can hold space for her and ask her what you need, and then communicate as the adult self, communicate as like the parent to myself, then I actually get her needs met. Whereas if I just allow her to run the show, then I'm not actually helping her, and obviously not myself.
And then obviously you've learned to do that with yourself, to understand how you meet your own needs. Have you been able to then take that forward and authentically then be able to tell the person you're in a relationship with, this is what you need?
Oof. Okay. Well, I'm asking you the questions. No, but it's sometimes
Scary, right?
I think my journey with my inner child has really helped me with having compassion for my partner's inner child, and having compassion for his perspective. Communicating it to the other person, that's a journey, I think.
Scary.
Yeah.
Super, super scary. Have I done that? In the past, maybe not. Oh, we've got guests.
VIP guest.
Pablo expresses his love massively.
I have so many animals in my podcast shows.
Yeah.
I think I need to make it a constant feature.
You okay, mate? You okay? So communicating from the inner child is this is healing at this point, right? This is therapy. This is having to go back and people ask themselves who they are in a relationship, why they are that way, and whether that's really what they want to be. And if they continue to be that way, whether that's going to allow them to have and build the life they want. So I spent a lot of time looking at my past and my childhood and trauma I've experienced through my life as an adult. And then I just really simply said, well, that's defined certain moments of my life. And I've allowed that to exist, and I don't want it to exist anymore. And then I asked myself, well, where do I want to be in 10 years? And if I clearly understand where I want to be in 10 years, who do I have to be to be able to allow me to have the best chance to get there? And then when you're looking at it from a relationship perspective and potential partners, you have to really just be honest. You have to be honest. This is who I am. These are the things I got wrong. This is what I've learned from previous relationships. I'm not proud of it, but if you're vulnerable and honest about it, their response will determine whether they've got the level of emotional intelligence, values, principles, to be able to say, well, wow, like, there's a level of authenticity that maybe make you guys be more attracted and be able to build a relationship with complete and utter transparency. And you use that pain as purpose, you know? I always talk about using pain as purpose and how I take trauma from triumph and how I've used it as fuel. And applying that to relationships is something I don't think we do, because often when we come out of a relationship and we feel heartbreak, it's the worst feeling in the world. For men and women go through it differently, but the worst feeling in the world, and I think we like bury it.
Yeah.
And facing it head on is, you know, it's kind of like this idea of kind of you fall off your bike, get back on it. It's like face it there and then when it is like the most real.
Yeah.
Because it's going to really set you up for not getting it wrong in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I think also with relationships, we've been sold this lie that happy relationship, the perfect relationship is just always shiny, you know, never fighting. But for me, true conscious partnership is actually, you know, conflict isn't a bad thing, because you can become more intimate with your partner if you can go through a period of conflict. So you don't need to like compare yourself to people's like Instagram version of their relationship or things. And I think the problem is that because people are comparing themselves to that, you know, we've been brought up on Disney fairy tales and all those kind of things, that you just magically see each other across the room and it's all sparkles and the rest of your relationship should be like that. And actually, I think if you can get through, so everyone has that honeymoon period where everything is sparkly, and then for some people, you know, they have that kind of like surface level relationship for a long time, or other people it happens a bit quicker. But if you can recognize that actually there is so much beauty beyond that, you know, beyond the conflict stage, and then you deepen in intimacy, and actually then it becomes so much better than that surface level relationship. But I think a lot of people kind of give up once it gets beyond that surface level. Like my mum describes it as like, you know, you meet each other in the porch when you first start dating, and then you go to the kitchen, and then maybe you go to the bedroom. But when you meet someone in the basement, that's when true intimacy can form. But I think a lot of people are scared to get beyond that, so they'd rather like get out of the relationship because it's too much to face. But if you can face those things together and then come through the other side, that is true deep intimacy and conscious partnership?
Yeah. I think people are always going to bring their own baggage to a relationship. I think you have to just ask yourself the question of, can I help you unpack that? Or am I going to allow it for me to fall over? And it's really complex because I've used complex a lot today. Winston.
Should we bring him up?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Oh, he's quite a big boy, actually.
Come on,
Up you go. Oh, there you go.
Winnie's.
There's going to be some interesting noises on the podcast, actually.
Winston's made it to the podcast.
Yes.
Our new guest, the most emotionally intelligent of us all, Winston Lagoon. He has got me through more heartache, more trauma. He used to just
Dog therapy is a real thing.
Come and sit
Seriously.
at my feet, look up at me,
Oh.
often condemning me, to be honest, but then give me some love to make me feel like it was all going to be okay. In relationships, we're going to bring baggage, and being able to address that and kind of say, well, if you're going to bring baggage, this is going to prevent us from being able to have a really beautiful, complete relationship. Then how do we unpack that together?
Yeah.
And that creates a trust,
Yes.
which many people just avoid, right?
Yeah.
Because there's going to be fear, you know, there may be embarrassment, there may be an element of your own trauma that you don't want to share.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of look at it and say, what have I brought to this relationship that is potentially going to be a hurdle, or what's going to potentially cause me not to be the man that I need to be able to have healthy, happy, loving relationship. And as you build that friendship, because that's the core of it, once you've built that friendship and you feel you can be honest, that's when, as a woman or a man, you have to just really process, listen, understand, and bring love to that. And if you can do that, it's so powerful that all of the trauma, all of the pain, all of the lessons can build something that's truly unbreakable.
Yeah.
Or you bring your big bag of baggage in and it becomes a wall between you, and you either have to knock it down or fall over it or walk away.
Yeah.
So I think we live in a world now where, again, I've spoken about mental health, like they say it's 1 in 8 adults. I'm like, bullshit. Being human means we experience mental health. It's the same as physical health.
Yeah.
There is no way to avoid those feelings, those emotions. It's just being human. So we have to break the stigma. We have to learn to communicate. And I've been a culprit of that, going through really tough times and then going introspective and holding myself and my mood changing or just my energy changing, where my ex-partner probably felt something wasn't right, but I felt like I was protecting her, and I felt like I'm a man, you know, I need to deal with this. And I thought I was dealing with it, but deep down I probably wasn't. And as a result, you know, it went shit-shaped.
It's all a journey, isn't it? And you learned a lot from the experience, didn't you? So.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think everything happens for a reason, and you have to determine what you're going to take from that. Like, it's weird, like sometimes I'm like, I look back and it's like, God, this guy's talking about trauma and this and that, and I'm like, I'm so thankful. Because without me even knowing it, that lit fires in me. And okay, I've now come to realize that it was the not feeling enough. But at 18, you know what, it didn't matter. I wanted to prove myself to the world. I wanted to be this amazing professional athlete. I wanted to play for my country. And I did all right. I played for England 18s, and I went on tour, and I signed a professional contract, and then bang, I didn't quite make it to the top, and I had to move on to my next challenge. Okay, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm launching my company. The truth was, again, I was trying to prove myself. I failed at rugby, I'm going to prove myself in business. I did that. But when you get to the top, often, you know, where is there to go from there then? So then it's just being able to learn that the ebbs and flows of life in every aspect don't allow it to affect you on a really deep personal level. You have to learn to detach, because now I kind of look at it and I smile. When something goes wrong in my day now, I,
You're very resilient.
I'm very resilient. When something goes wrong now, my response is to laugh. And I don't know if it's subconscious. I don't know if, because in the bigger scheme of things, it's kind of funny. But I'm like, now I don't allow my day to like, and I remember back when I was working super stressed and living in New York, and I'd spill my coffee on my white shirt, and that was it, I'd have a bad day. I'd allow that thought to be able to then ruin the rest of my day.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, okay, whatever, it's funny.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's an omen, I'm gonna have a great day.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
it seems silly, but the next thing that happens is a positive, and I'm like, great, I knew I would be.
Yeah, it's all perspective,
But it's
isn't
the same in a relationship. It's exactly the same in a relationship, because I remember running my first company, super stressed all the time, kind of growing apart from my partner at the time, and she would bring stress, I would bring stress. Whereas when we were coming together at the end of the day, it should have been relief. She'd be like, oh my God, I've had such a stressful day and I've been working 15 hours and okay, at least we're here together. Now how do we now enjoy the time together? But we didn't, we brought stress to it. So guess what? We argued, we became distant, and it went wrong. So now it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, I choose to do this. I choose to do this in my business life. How do I make sure that when I'm with people, and it's not just in relationships and in loving relationships, it's with friendships as well. It'd be like, I can have the worst day, but if I'm meeting a buddy, I'm like super present. Like I put my phone down, I'll be sitting there and go, right, what are we gonna do? Let's go make memories. Let's go and have fun. And they'll be like, oh, how's it gonna work? I'm like, it's stressful. We're trying to change the world. There's a billion people with mental health issues right now. I've got a lot of work on. We're gonna do it, but let's focus on right here, right now. Let's be present. Put your phone away, and let's go and have a crack. And that shift in my mindset has been like really helpful for my own mental health and my own happiness.
I'd also love for you to share something which you shared with me when we were having the coffee about that you started messaging your friends when you were just, and I think I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, so this is a bigger story in the fact that about 18 months ago, maybe a bit more, I lost a friend to suicide, and it hit me really hard because I kept coming back to this. I just needed one conversation. I just needed one conversation, and it was too late. And I felt guilt. I felt regret. I remembered the last time we saw one another, and it was just like so much love, so much happiness. I can still see the smile on his face. We had a picture together, and it made me be conscious of the impact that a single conversation or a single message can have. And when I started telling my friends that I love them, they were like, are you okay? Is everything all right? Like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I just really love you. I genuinely really, really love you. And then I tell them, I like reminisce on a funny story. And after several conversations, they were like, men aren't very good at doing it. So I made a lot of my buddies feel uncomfortable. They're used to it now and they do it back because we've changed that dynamic. But people message me and say, do you know what? Like, you have no idea how much I needed that. And that was like, okay. So I just try and make it a daily habit to, what does it take? 2 minutes to send a message?
Yeah.
I'm very intuitive. So if somebody pops to my mind, I'll call them. Because I'm like, why did I think of them? So I just pick up the phone. I did it yesterday with one of my oldest friends, a woman called Liz, and she messaged me, I was just thinking of you. So I was like, hey, how you doing? And we had like the most beautiful catch up, and she made me laugh and reminisced about our school days. And actually I needed her. I didn't realize it, but she did to me what I tried to do to other people. And that was like super powerful and very humbling. But yeah, so 18 months ago I lost a friend, and I believe in God's plan. Very serendipitously, I then was introduced to John and Marisa at a point where I was questioning everything, questioning my identity, questioning my worth, questioning my impact and what I wanted to do, and how I never wanted to experience that feeling of loss again, and how avoidable it should be, and how we just need to stop this stigma. And that's when me and John hung out for a coffee, which turned into a 3-hour coffee, and met Marisa, and they said, you should come and work with us. And I explained I'm an entrepreneur, I'm completely unemployable. The last job I had was like 18 years ago, and I got fired from it. So, but he basically wooed me and took me for dinner and slowly convinced me that this is the way that we're going to be able to have the biggest impact and change the world. And I definitely feel like we're doing that. We're having a real impact and saving lives. And it's the best feeling ever.
I just really appreciate how vulnerable you've been on this show as well. And I know that your voice as well is really going to have a huge impact on the world. And your openness about being vulnerable, I just think is huge. So I'm just, very grateful.
I'll leave with this as well, because the truth is, we've all messed up. We've all got things wrong. And I've failed so many times in relationships. And I would just say to everybody, it's just like, I'm certainly sorry for the man I was. It's not the man I am. And it's certainly not the man I'm trying to be in the future. And I would thank each and every person. This taught me a lesson. It's nothing but love. And I think if we can come back to that point and get rid of the hurt and focus on the love and remember those moments where you're laughing uncontrollably and you feel love so much, if you can go back to that, all the pain goes away. It's a different kind of pain. It's a loss of love, but that was then, and you can then move forward with a really beautiful perspective on what relationships should be. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Ben, just quickly, I have 3 quick-fire questions, which I didn't send to you before.
I've been sweating. I just realised how flop in my hair is.
You haven't had the quick-fire questions yet.
Let's go. I like quick-fire.
So what is the meaning of love to you?
The meaning of love to me is being able to completely pick one another. I always said it's easy to say I love you, but being able to actually pick that person when it matters. You've got these 2 choices and you actually go, no, it's easy, I pick you. For me, that's like the best feeling in the world. And when it's done mutually together, I think it's really, really powerful.
What do you wish you knew earlier about love?
It hurts. Love hurts. But that's okay. Learn to accept it, because you can only really, really love someone. You can only really feel that pain and the different sides of emotion, because love can really, really, really hurt. But also, love is the greatest thing in the world. There is nothing better than feeling pure love. But it's okay for it to hurt sometimes. Just accept it and go back to the good, positive side of love.
Is there anyone, any people, anything, any place that you would like to give a shout out of love to here on the show?
Oh, good question.
No pressure. All your friends at home are going to be like, should have been me.
I'll be honest, I'll give Marisa Peer and John Davey the biggest shout out, because to work with somebody like Marisa and the unsung hero, John, behind the scenes, who's their co-founders, apart from being incredible colleagues and obviously what we're doing and work together, they have been the most incredible friends to me. So understanding, so loving. To be able to have Marisa Peer at the end of the phone, or to be able to go for a coffee, I've been very fortunate. She's given me some best advice. She's very funny, so when I'm crying, she's definitely gave me a hug and given me perspective and made me cry. But I don't think I could have got through the last year or so if it wasn't for Marisa. She's really changed my perspective on myself and on relationships. And then John's just I love him and his red hat. I love him and his red hat. So, John and Marisa Peer.
Amazing, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm really sweating. And I give very big hugs and I don't let go. So that was a small hug for me. But always hug and hug hard.
Yes, beautiful.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for coming on as well.